Hey everyone, this is Roman Prokopchuk, and this is the Digital Savage Experience podcast. Today I have with me Nick Sotelo. Nick is the host of the Upgraded Life podcast. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a PhD in counseling, education, and supervision. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you kind of get into the career you're in? Some of the things that you went through along the way, some of the pivots, and basically who you are.
Sure. That's a wide open question. And with the time that we have, I'll do my best with that. So when I think back through my life, one of the themes that comes out front and center is I was a reluctant leader, meaning that I had gifts, I had physical abilities, athletic gifts, I was talented, I'm fairly smart. And so school was never a big issue for me. Elementary, middle school, high school. Actually did really poorly in elementary school, and that's probably a product of the kind of the rough start in childhood that I had. But then kind of middle school, I'm driven by challenge, right? And so in middle school is when kind of grades start to have some meaning, and I realized like I was behind the other people in my class, and I decided no more of that. And so almost overnight, I switched to being kind of like a B and C student to a straight A student, and really carried that on through high school. Took a little bit of a dip in college, but came back at it with 2 graduate degrees. But that reluctant leader, meaning that there was opportunities for me to lead, and I would always shy away from it because I had this self-doubt, this limiting beliefs about who I was, and a lot of that was a product of the messaging that I received as a child that I had to become aware of, accept, and forgive the people that were the source of that messaging. And so the person that I am today, I'm a lot of different things, but first and foremost, I'm a husband and father, and family is one of my core values. And I always want to lead with that family is ultimately important, and the rest of it comes in addition to that. And so I've been a professional helper for 20 years. I have a 20-year career in youth corrections. Along the way, early on, a kind of an entry-level job in youth corrections, my first supervisor encouraged me. He invested in me, saw my potential, and encouraged me to continue to go to school as a means to continue to advance my career. So I took that advice, and I was working full-time and a full-time graduate student. Did that 2 separate rounds, for master's degree to PhD, and have been, a licensed marriage and family therapist since 2009. Built private practice with cash paying clients, which those in the therapy world will kind of understand what that means versus billing insurance. I chose to go a different direction in how I operated that. I've helped other counselors do the same. And kind of my last phase is, jumping to the top of the academic heap with the PhD, and really taking that and carrying my message to a wider audience, doing public speaking, doing speaking in the realm of youth corrections, bringing content out on my podcast and other venues. I'm part of a mastermind. Like right now, I just got off a call where I developed a 4-part anger resolution protocol that was going to 400 men that are part of the mastermind that I'm part of. So just kind of leveraging my experience doing this work, sifting through my own anger experiences, and then providing a protocol. So I do a lot of those things. I take my life experience, take my professional experience, take all of the stuff that I had to overcome. And now my mission is to help people upgrade their life. That's what this is all about. And you have to realize and reach your potential in order to have the upgraded life. So that's the best that I can do right now, Roman. Hopefully that will serve for the time being.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you made a good point about somebody investing in you and encouraging you to move on forward in terms of education or whatever you have. So I think in your career, I think everyone has that one person that may have had an impact on you pivoting or directly a role you've been in when they invested, like go for a master's degree, a doctorate degree, and we'll pay for it because we see potential in you. I think that's important. And sometimes when you don't have it, you can kind of veer off in terms of direction. And we obviously spoke about this on your podcast as well. And some of the background that you've told me in terms of youth corrections, a lot of those kids are obviously coming from the foster care system and don't have that direction. So I think having that kind of person that's instrumental in guiding you, maybe professionally or personally, and giving you something in that sense, that opportunity or that push, I think is really important.
Absolutely. And in the world of criminal justice and criminology, we talk about criminogenic risk factors. That's a made up word. You can't look it up in a dictionary, but criminogenic, crime producing or crime genesis factors. And one of the protective factors is having one person, one adult outside of your nuclear family or whatever you call family. So one person that's outside of that, that you can say, if I have a need, this is a person that I can go to. One person provides a protective factor that will buffer somebody from penetrating into the juvenile justice system. One person.
Yeah, and it's sad that, a lot of these kids within the system and then obviously end up in the correctional system, in terms of foster care, don't have that person. Or if they do have people, they're not the best role models or even push them into the wrong direction in terms of some of the behaviors that they see. So, I mean, obviously, as a foster parent, I see it. And we've really had two success cases in terms of parents that genuinely did everything they should have done in terms of getting the kids back and changing who they were in that environment. But I think one product of that is the parents don't change. Obviously, the foster care system is broken, and then there's a recidivism rate where the kids have something happen to them or see something again, and it's a yo-yo effect back and forth. So when they grow up, they're so depleted emotionally and so scarred, then they're easily kind of guided into the wrong kind of paths as well from their peers and the environments that they're in.
Yeah, it can be a sad situation when it's case by case, but it's also representative of things that are it's an undercurrent in our society, and we need to raise awareness about it, and we need to be doing more to intervene before they penetrate and become the kids that I get to work with.
Yep. I mean, like we spoke about, me and my wife have had younger kids. So like that kind of instrumental in terms of the younger years, developing good habits and showing, good role models when they're young, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and really even just being for them, because a lot of them have been abandoned by, family members, moms, dads, whoever. And, hopefully 10, 20 years down the line, that will make that difference or that kind of, click into the right direction.
Sure.
So, what motivates you to succeed?
Wow. Well, for a long time it was unhealthy, right? And meaning that when I first went to graduate school, the first round, although it was my supervisor that it encouraged me, but it was also me playing the role in my family, meaning that in my family, the males all achieve higher education. So, my grandfather, was a veterinarian and ended up landing a high caliber, high powered job with the U.S. government as a federal meat inspector, and he controlled the whole West Coast region, including Alaska and Hawaii, and so he could walk into any plant and shut it down just because he didn't like the way somebody looked at him. That was kind of the power, and he would do those things, right? And so my uncle was an engineer and worked for Lockheed Martin or General Dynamics, and then they got bought by Lockheed Martin, which they make fighter planes, F-16s, F-15s, F-22s. So, and he's, his name is on the, cockpit designs for F-16s. So we used to have models of F-16s in our house all the time, and aerial photos and whatnot. And so that was kind of the expectation that was laid upon me, that I would succeed in school, get good grades, and that if you didn't do that, then you would risk, bringing on that being less than, being not worthy, bringing on shame to the family. And so even when I kind of went into that field of psychology and then counseling, marriage and family therapy, there wasn't a ton of accolades for that from the family. It wasn't what they had envisioned, but yet it was the direction that I went. But a lot of it was to appease them, honestly. Now, am I happy that I did it? Absolutely. But it took me in thank goodness that I was in a counseling program that forced me to do my own work, to sift through some of these formidable experiences that we have as children, to kind of realize that and make that connection. Because if I hadn't had made that connection, who knows where, I would have gone, and who knows if I would have been able to actually use the education that I received. And you see that all the time. You see people, it's actually one of the biggest problems that entry level college folks will experience. Like, the only reason why I'm here is because my dad made me be here. I don't really want to be here. Right. And so that's a common, experience, especially in undergraduate world. So I didn't really go into it, the first round of graduate school, from a healthy perspective, right? I also saw it as, as a means for career advancing. So there's that part of it. What I always like to see things and experience things, and if I can improve upon it, that'll drive me. And so when my wife and I were getting married in this era, in this part of the state, there, if you were going to get married in a church, the pastors developed a covenant and said that, pastors would only marry you if you had so many sessions of premarital counseling. So that was a requirement. And so we did that, my wife and I, and it was a pretty crummy experience, to be honest. And I thought to myself, like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Hey, maybe I can do it better. And so I remember having that being one of the drivers, in terms. So, I like to look at scenarios. I like to look at situations. I like to take underdogs and invest in them, help them, and turn them into something that, A, they didn't ever think possible, or B, what other people told them wasn't possible. That motivates me. That pushes me to keep taking steps. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, and I think that kind of push by family members and parents to do something like education exists in the culture in the United States, and harder in cultures like, let's say, Japan, China,
Right.
where they're like studying for, 5, 6 hours after school, and like the rates of suicide and depression are so high. I think,
Mhm.
I mean, there's a certain cutoff to that. I mean, obviously you want your kids to be successful, but you have to have some kind of wiggle room where they can still pursue their passions in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what's one thing you may have seen in yourself as a weakness in the past that you've turned around and utilized as a strength today?
And that's, you know, because of the messaging that I got when I was a young child. So my bio mom is the black sheep of the family, and she's passed now, but she was the black sheep. She, 15, 16 years old, started really rebelling and would run away. Long story short, she had me when she was 19, and my biological father is full-blooded Mexican. Came over the southern border, and that didn't really set well with my grandparents. And so I grew up, being adopted by my maternal grandparents and coming to live with them when I was 2 years old. And that's when I would, over the years, pick up this messaging that they would fight. I mean, my grandfather was a rageaholic. He had, heart problems that required medication that would throw him into, manic episodes. And he was a great big man. He was, 6'2", 200 plus pounds, and he liked to throw his weight around. And so I witnessed a lot of, domestic violence. I saw a lot of crazy things happen that kids shouldn't have to see. For whatever reason, I didn't get physically abused. I can remember a couple times being, smacked across the face for being a smartass or something like that. But, never had the belt taken to me or those types of things. But I tell you what did happen, it was the psychological torture, as I call it. The messaging that I got, was enough to break me. And it almost did, a couple different times. And so, your question specifically, I grew up having an anger edge to me. That was that guy that you didn't want to push, too far. And sometimes we didn't always know what too far, where the line was for too far. And then I would, erupt and have this explosive, rageful anger. And that plagued me. It plagued me as an individual. It plagued me in my career, but it definitely, in my process to create my own family, unfortunately, they got to see the negative side of that. And it took me hitting, some significant rock bottom type scenarios in order to do something about it. And just like I was talking about early on in this show, having my own take on anger resolution and putting it together a protocol that has worked for me, and I've seen it work for other people, and putting that out there. So that's something that definitely was a weakness that caused a lot of damage in my life, that I am happy and excited to help other people through to overcome that, and hopefully limit the amount of damage. If I can reach people earlier, they won't have to do the same things that I did before they realize they got to do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, like myself personally, I've witnessed domestic abuse in terms of my father and like infidelity and stuff. And that stuff obviously stays with you. I mean, I've been angry, but I don't know, like not angry where I'm going around beating up people or just like raging, but it bottles up, and also it directly affects the closest people around you usually. So like the tone that I use, stuff like that, and I don't even realize that I'm not even conscious of it. And it's like strangers, I'm like super sweet and nice, but like when I get upset or pissed off, like the tone that I use to people around me that like truly love me, and it's like you hurt directly the ones that care about you the most and push them away in that, unless you learn how to deal with it yourself.
Absolutely.
And then also going back to your previous, the underdog kind of story, I think me personally, I would say to a certain extent, I'm an underdog, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of like back against the wall kind of mindset, like I thrive more in. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I create more and innovate more because knowing that, the opportunities that I'm given, some I've gotten, some no's, some doors closed, that kind of thing. But like persevering and the resilience in that, I think it drives me even more. And I think obviously there's people that are complacent or like take their foot off the pedal, but like having that mindset, and it's hard to maintain it because if you achieve a certain level of success, you just want to hang out, maybe take a vacation, take the pedal off a little bit. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to keep that kind of hunger mentality because there's always somebody kind of behind you. And I always say, like, I don't want to be number one. I want to be number two, always chasing number one because I'm the innovative one and the hungry one.
Yeah, absolutely. I about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I came across Brendan Burchard and High Performance Habits, and that was a really impactful book for me as an individual. And then I took a different position in the agency that I worked for, where I was directly leading a team, and so I took them through the book as well. And then about a month ago, with a new team of leaders, I brought that book back out again. So I've been listening through the audiobook, and one of the things, Roman, that Brendan says that really struck me, and so I'm so glad that I went back to it and listened to it, is people like you and me. I'm gonna put us in the same category as high performers. That, and Brendan, sets us loose and says it's okay to be a high performer. It's okay to want to achieve more and strive for more, and that there's other people that will tell us, slow down, you're going to hurt yourself. Can't you just be happy with what you have? And those are messages that, yes, there might be some wisdom to them, especially if they're coming from people that are really close to us and know us, right? But if it's kind of the extended people, and like you were talking about your mindset upgrade tip that you gave me on my show, like learn what to focus on and who to listen to, and learn how to block out the other ones. But when I heard that just a couple days from Brendan about it's okay to be a high performer and want to continue that high performer. So I love what you said about, I don't want to be number one, I want to be number two so I can keep after it.
Yeah, the contender is always hungrier. I mean, when you become the champ, you constantly have to defend that number one
Right.
spot. And
Right.
I mean, if you're number two, obviously you can become number one at some point. But I like kind of like that chasing and that kind of like urgency mindset. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, it's hard to maintain, like I said. And I'm not forcing other people to think that way because a lot of people, are happy being in the same job, a government role or any role that's safe in terms of like the family obligations they may have for 30 years, 40 years, and then retiring. But like for me, mentally, there's more. When I made like a mindset shift to legacy, and there's so much information out there that with the internet, you can learn anything. You just need to have the desire to do so. Then like the economy and opportunities became like so open, and what I can really do, it was on me. So I mean, I really want to kind of maintain that. Obviously, I don't every day. Sometimes it's just
Yeah,
like exhausting, especially during COVID and having four foster kids, two dogs, one with cancer, and this and that, and family health issues and stuff like that. But I think it's important to have different routines and things that can like bring you back to that place.
sure. One of the things that you said, the Roman, that stuck out to me is being happy, right? And I know that on my show we talked about Gary Vee, and he'll give a disclaimer sometimes when he's leading into a talk or a keynote, and I do this sometimes as well. And that disclaimer is, if you're happy with your life, if you're content with your life, then stop right here. Quit listening. Right? Because what I'm going to offer you is insight, opportunities, strategies to get more out of life. But if you're good with your life, then you've made it, right? And so I believe that. But my challenge is that there's a lot of people who settle in their life and then convince themselves that they're happy, right? Convince themselves that they're okay with it. And kind of my litmus test for that is, if you think that you're that person, right? Listen to your default language, meaning when that person cuts you off on your commute to work, what comes out of you, right? And if you get all pissed off and you've got all the expletives coming out, I don't think you're as happy as you think that you are, right? When you're standing in line or going through the line at Starbucks and they mess up your order and they butcher your name, and that kind of gets under your skin, I don't think you're as happy as you think that you are, right? And so I will challenge people that say, "Oh, I'm good and life is good," but then their default language, and then let alone what language happens behind their own closed doors, right? I think that people settle, and I think they settle out of the unknown, fear of the unknown. Like, I'm good with this, career that I am, this um, W-2 salary-based job. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're as happy as you say that you are, if you're as content as you say that you are, it should show in the little bits of adversity that come at us every single day. Does that make sense to you, Roman?
Yeah, it should resonate in other parts of your life. I mean, I'm gonna tell a short story that like took me back to what you were saying. So, 10 years ago, I remember, I mean, I still to a certain extent, I think people a lot of the time are like keyboard warriors. When there's no repercussions, they puff up their chest and they're the hardest person. But when you come face to face, they step down. So I was pulling out of my driveway on my way to the gym when I was, I believe, 25. It literally took me back there, and this car sped up, basically honked, and the guy just gave me the finger, like why? So I'm like, all right. So I accelerated and waited for a red light. So I was in like a basically like a tank top or whatever, like my arms and like chest were exposed. And then I get out of my car on the red light and I went to the guy's window. I'm like, you're tough when you're driving by, get out and do that now. I don't know where that came from. I mean, I guess maybe I was still dealing with stuff, but it's just like one of those things that sometimes upset me. If people just like, I don't know, maybe I should let it go. But people that do things and not think there's any repercussions. So at that time, I thought I would be the one to maybe put that person in check. Obviously, in the last 10 years, I've went to therapy and to cope with things like seeing the domestic violence and stuff. But I don't know if that was that direct kind of correlation. But it took me back to that story as you were telling that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, what made you kind of start the podcast and kind of jump into that? Did you want to do that prior? And how has that went in terms of kind of who you are and the message that you're trying to portray?
Yeah, appreciate that question. I was looking for, I think everybody has a message. I know that I have a message that people need to hear. And so I was looking at the various ways to get that message out there, and whether it was, just purely social media, posting positivity, Instagram, Facebook. And, that was all right for a while. Um, but it really wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And along the way, I fell in love with the podcast platform. There probably isn't a day that doesn't go by that I'm not consuming something, out of a podcast. But I was concerned about the technology hump that I would have to overcome in order to the barrier of technology and what it would really take in order to pull it off. And so that kind of kept that fear about, am I going to be able to do this with technology, kept me out of the game for too long. Right. And so, you and I are both using, Anchor as a platform, and they sell it as, it's easy as using your cell phone and a set of earbuds. And so I said, all right, if it's that easy, and I'm the mindset guy, why am I letting this, technology barrier hold me back? And so I created my first podcast, about a year ago, in September of 19, and didn't do anything with it. Just kind of let that one or two episodes just kind of sit there for, I don't know, months. And then again, really kind of feeling this desire to get a message out, knowing that, I've helped my, I've forced myself to do the work and have gotten help from other people. In my career, I've, got a lot of underdog stories under my belt now, where people that were down and out, whether it was people that I worked with, coworkers, or kids that I worked with, or people that it came through my counseling office door. And I have some thoughts about things. I have some thoughts about how to get more out of this life, how to realize and reach your potential. And so I also realized that I'm fairly natural in front of the mic, fairly natural in front of the camera. I've done a lot of public speaking. I've spoke on the national stage. And so it just kind of reduced all of these stupid fears and these barriers about the podcast thing. And so I bought my first round of equipment. I bought into a how to do podcasting program that I credit quite a bit for getting me to where I'm at right now, and credit me getting in front of your, on your show, and bought the initial package of equipment and threw it together and took massive action. Right. There's the guru speak, but that's what it was. I didn't know how to use any of this stuff. I mean, not that I'm, not, pretty good with technology. I am, because when I used to do training for my agency and have to go all over the place, I carried all of my equipment. And then when you show up to a room, you have to figure out, like, okay, there's the projector. Okay, there's the soundboard. How do I make what I have work with this? And so learning how to keep all the crap with you all the time. So I just had never applied that to camera, microphone, podcast, producing, Audacity, all that stuff that comes with it. Right. And so, but yeah, ultimately it's to get my message out. I know that I have a message that people can benefit from, leveraging all my life experience to help people upgrade their life. That's really what it's about for me.
Yeah, and like we talked about, I think it's a superior medium. It's the only one, in my opinion, you can really multitask and you really jump into kind of a lot of deep stuff.
Right.
Unlike, you're at some marketing or, networking event where it's just like, hey, my name is, what do you do? Okay, I do that too. I mean, obviously some shows are more scripted than others, but I feel it's best when a show maybe has some kind of format in terms of what the host wants to ask, but then the conversation can go wherever it naturally needs and has to go. And sometimes like that conversation needs to be had.
Absolutely.
So what's one piece of advice you may have for the audience, personal or professional?
Just any piece of advice.
And I mean, your top go-to advice, whatever you want to share.
For me, it's all about mindset, meaning that I think that you can have the best plan, you can have the best training, you can have the best, 5-point proven process. But if you don't have the mindset established that you will until, then the best of all that kind of stuff isn't really going to help you. Right. For example, and you talked about it, the knowledge is out there on the internet. And so knowledge should not be an excuse anymore. It used to be. It used to be an excuse that if you didn't have access to the knowledge, to school, to the experts, to the authorities, well, then, yeah, you're probably going to be behind the 8 ball, so to speak. That's all been almost obliterated, right? During this COVID experience, I don't know if you've seen, it's in your neck of the woods, but it's either Harvard or MIT was offering free classes in a variety of subjects. All you had to do is sign up, get on a Zoom call, and you were in front of the experts in that field, math classes, all kinds of things, and we're seeing that shift in education, that a lot of education is going to be moving to a free format because it's out there anyway, right? And so you have to, if knowledge is your barrier, well, I can't do this because I don't know about it, that's an excuse. Through the internet, through podcasts, through audiobooks, if you read 5 books in the same category, in the same discipline, it will automatically put you in the top 10% of knowledge in that thing. And the reason for that is because any quality book that's being, like, say, for podcasting, for example, right? You read 5 books on how to do a podcast. If they're quality books, it's going to put you in the top 10%. And the reason for that is because those 5 authors are all pulling from the same vat of what it takes to have a proven podcast, if that makes sense. 5 books. That's all it takes. So even if you only read a book a quarter in 2020, right? You're 4/5 of the way there to be in the top 10. You'd be considered an expert in the discipline, right? So it's mindset. And for me, mindset work is 3 parts. It's understanding your core values, which you and I have talked about quite a bit. It's having, empowered affirmations, right? So we've got to dump the negative messaging that we've been pumped full of, right, and replace it with the empowered affirmations. And you're going to have to edit this part because I'm blanking on the third one. Core values, affirmations, and it is having a daily routine that solidifies these things in your mindset work. So upgrading your mindset for me is where I believe it's at. And it takes work and it takes diligence, and it's not something that happens overnight, right? You don't blame a gym for not making you strong if you're not going into the gym every single day, right? And so mindset work is the gym for your brain, and you have to commit to it, every single day, and give it 30, 60, 90 days, right? It's not going to happen overnight. People that I've worked with directly as a coach, we'll start off on the front end and do mindset work. We'll do core values and affirmations, and 30, 60 days will go by, and they're starting to kind of teeter back off. And I'll say, hey, let's look at your affirmations. And I'll look at them and I say, well, how come you don't have affirmations for this area of your life that you're really struggling with? And they'll say, oh, I didn't really think about it, right? And so there's a process for that in terms of doing it right, doing it effectively, and oftentimes you need outside help to help you with that. So that's what I would say. My advice is take a look at your mindset. Take a look at the extent that you have, automatic negative thoughts. I call it, default negative mindset. And this is what we're born with, right? Everybody has this. We're hardwired for it. I don't know why. But negativity is such a magnet for us, and it infuses in our brain, and then it becomes what we call, in the coaching world, limiting beliefs and all that kind of jazz. But you've got to do your mindset work, and without it, you're just going to be limiting your own potential.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, the whole coursework and the Ivy League, and there's a lot of schools opening like full degrees in terms of the coursework that you can basically go through yourself. Obviously, you may not get the credits, but you get that knowledge base. I'm actually taking the most popular class ever in Yale. It's the science of happiness. So
Right.
it's just one of those things where, like, you get certain things to do every week, and there's actually assignments, and then you complete it. I think if you pay like $50 or something from like the course, I think it's Coursera in terms of the platform, you
Mm-hmm.
get like a certificate. But obviously, I mean, it's more so one of those things in terms of like having a better mindset and different habits and things of that nature. So I definitely feel like it's important. I think it's also accountability. Also, if you have somebody that keeps you accountable, it's a lot easier. I mean, sometimes we need kind of coaches or people in our life to remind us and keep us on track in that way as well.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you stopping by today. Can you let the audience know how they can find you and your podcast?
Absolutely. So my website is nicksotelo.com. And if you want the podcast, it's nicksotelo.com/TUL podcast, the Upgraded Life podcast. And that's the way that you can, directly find my website, find ways to connect with me and listen to episodes for sure. I'm on social media. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. Facebook is just Nick Sotelo, and it should be easy to see. You're going to see the purple Upgraded Life logo and artwork all over the place. On Instagram, it's the Upgraded Life, at the Upgraded Life, and I think it's the Upgraded hyphen or underscore life is my Instagram handle. And I offer a free strategy session to folks, and my guarantee on that is you give me 30 minutes of your time, and at minimum you're going to come away with some clarity about what the next steps are. And whether you work with me or not doesn't really really matter to me, but it potentially could be 30 minutes well spent.
Awesome. Thanks again for stopping by.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.